Hello, Tatiana. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, the pleasure's mine. I'm so glad we're finally able to connect and have this conversation. So many good things to talk about. Such a fantastic story that you have, an international story, a compelling story, a story of great triumph, with maybe a little struggle along the way, but also very exciting that a Latina story. And so
Thank you.
you're welcome. I'm so excited and I'll stop talking so we can learn more about your story. So please, Tatiana, share about your story with us. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll share like the real story, like the stuff you don't see on like the LinkedIn bullets,
Perfect.
But what I would say is I'm originally from São Paulo, Brazil, and grew up there. And I don't know why, but my dream since I was a little girl, probably 7 or 8, was to be an executive in a big company one day. And I don't know why. And like, I think kids have way more exciting dreams than that. To be like an astronaut, a firefighter. My daughter wants to be a movie director one day, which is pretty awesome. But
Awesome.
that was my,
Yes.
yeah, but that was my dream, and I would walk around the house carrying my dad's briefcase, wearing my mom's high heels, pretending I was going to work. And like the amazing thing is that, my dad saw a little leader in me. And even though I would say Brazil is a patriarchal country, he believed the world was going to be led by females one day. And he wanted me to get ready. And he instilled in me this idea that I could be and do anything I wanted to. And so he started to coach me up from like a young age to, become the leader that I wanted to be. And in many ways, like that's why I made some decisions throughout my life, like coming to the US, to AU to get an education, because I thought that was going to just open more doors and help me sort of my path to achieving what I wanted to achieve. And I'm so grateful because I not only got one Indiana University degrees, but two, and I got my MBA there too. And after that, like started my, I'd say, real career, full career in corporate America. First working at Procter Gamble in brand management for 6 years, and loved my time there. I often joke it was continued education for 6 years because they teach and train you so much around marketing and leadership, and I'm eternally grateful. But after a while, I realized I was selling soap, like laundry detergent, and I'm not that passionate about it. I wanted to do what I love and what I'm good at before a company and a brand that I was more passionate about, that I was more connected to its purpose. So I grew up loving Disney, traveling from Brazil to Walt Disney World with my family. But it wasn't until my daughter turned 3, she's 9 now, and she turned 3, and we flew in from Cincinnati to Florida for her birthday. And when I saw Disney through her eyes, I'm like, that's it. Like, I want to work at Disney, but I didn't know anybody there. So I basically went on LinkedIn and networked my way into the company. Eventually, a great role opened up that was a good fit. And I joined a little over 6 years ago, first in Florida, working on Disney Cruise Line. Then, about 4 years ago, moved to California to work at Disneyland, and continue to learn and grow. The last year was insanely hard as Disneyland was completely closed for more than a year because of COVID. And I was very fortunate because I kept working, but my entire team was furloughed a couple times. And
Mm.
and it was challenging for sure, but I would say I learned and grew a lot, both as a person, as a human, but also as a leader and who I needed to be in order to help my team go through that. And as we were getting ready to reopen and the team came back, I knew I was ready for a different challenge, for a different chapter. So that's when I left Disney and joined Airbnb, and have been with Airbnb just for 2 months. So it's still learning, still, meeting people and all of that. But it's very exciting to be more in like a tech, startup kind of place after having worked at Procter and Gamble and Disney for so long. So I'm just really excited about that. But what I didn't say is that during my first few years in corporate America, I'd say that I learned that I needed to be and act and behave a certain way to be successful. There's a lot of pressure to fit in. And for me to fit in, it meant to become someone else, to like not be me. And as I shape shifted and morphed and transformed myself into this person that I thought I needed to be in order to be successful, in many ways actually worked him
Mm.
because I got promoted and I got like the jobs that I wanted and etc. But after a while, I realized that deep inside, I was miserable. I was exhausted. I was overwhelmed and I felt stuck. And I just didn't know what to do about it. And I thought that, again, that's the only thing I could keep doing. So I kept pushing it through and just shoving the signals that were coming up that were telling me I couldn't keep going as I was going. But, sometimes life has a way of like waking us up when we're not listening. And I, was diagnosed with early stage breast cancer. And it was like this huge wake up call in words that you do not want to hear, right, from your doctor. But, I'm healthy now and I'm doing well. But now I look back at it and I actually see it as a gift because I needed the wake up call. I needed to see that the way I was going was no longer sustainable. And I needed to find a new way of being, of working and leading that was more in alignment with who I am. And that has been the journey that I've been in for the many, many, many years now. And as we've gone through the pandemic, I actually started to talk more about it more openly with my teams and the people around me because I realized that we need to shift and unlearn some things and learn some new things to kind of help us not only survive, but really thrive coming out of the pandemic.
Tatiana, thank you so much for sharing so much with us today. And I appreciate so much you saying that you're talking with your colleagues about this, right? And
Mm-hmm.
gaining their feedback. As you think about advice for us as you moved from survival mode into a facet of thriving, right? Getting back to all that excitement you had early on and
Right.
not conforming to necessarily what you believed others wanted you to be and were that was being validated. As you thought about this movement, this transformation, what were some of the things you talked to yourself about? And what were some of the things you talked to your colleagues about?
Right.
To help
Yeah.
them also gain that momentum, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think there are like two core pieces of it that I think are at the center of it that I needed to embrace and shift my perception of those concepts. And the first one is vulnerability, and the other is authenticity. You know, as again, I was learning how to act and how to lead and how to show up in corporate America. I think a lot of us learn to like wear armors
Mm.
and sort of put forth this idea and perception that we have it all together, we always know everything, and we're like the super warriors, right? Like super athletes kind of people. And what I realized is that pretending was exhausting. And the vulnerability is not a weakness, but it can actually be a strength. And what I mean by that is when we're all showing up as like a tenth of ourselves and pretending to be someone else, other people are seeing that and they're comparing their real selves to the tiny thing you're projecting, right? So
Mm.
as I was projecting myself as again this super strong leader who has it all figured out and everything put together all the time, my team, the people that were working with me, would just see that reflection, and they're compare their own real messy stories and truths of themselves to that tiny projection and somehow feel like they were not adequate. They were inadequate and they were like not enough because they were comparing to this. It's like us going on social media and comparing our true stories to like people's highlight reels. Because like people are only sharing like the most awesome like staged photos ever,
Of course.
but like we're comparing to that, right?
Mm,
And especially during the pandemic, as like everything's turned upside down, all of our worlds collapsed, and
mm.
like we're working from home, we're trying to figure out how to be a mom and a work and blah 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 blah. Like pretending that we have everything figured out, it's not only hurtful, it's not helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. At a time when we were all at our most vulnerable, good things can come from reaching that point, right?
Exactly. And I would say it takes courage, Tim,
Mm.
because that's not what we learn and that's not what you see, right? So putting yourself out there is like, who's going to take their armor first? You go
Mm.
ahead. you know? And by the way, there is no proof that taking your armor off won't hurt you somehow in your
Mm.
performance in your work. Because again, that's not the recipe, right? It's not the playbook. But again, I have learned that as I've taken my armor off and opened up, amazing things have happened because other people took their armor off and opened up. And we were then able to connect at like a much deeper level. And I actually was able to learn more about their whole selves as like whole beings and really what was holding them back from bringing and being their best versions of themselves at work, and actually then coach them and help them with that rather than like the tippy of the iceberg that they were projecting.
Mhm, mhm.
And in many ways, that's how I think we've been able to like unlock a lot for the team. But the other thing, the authenticity is almost related to it because it's about right showing you as your truest self. And again, that's also super scary because as a woman, as a Latina, I learned that being myself was not okay, that I needed to be someone else. But for me, is like the redefinition of what success means. And instead of thinking that I needed to fit in to be successful, to flip it and I can only be successful as I am myself, if I am myself. And that shift, like within me, then allows me to show up as myself, even though sometimes it is uncomfortable. Many times it is uncomfortable. But again, I think with both vulnerability and authenticity, what has happened is that so many people feel like this inkling that's like there has to be a different way. I just don't know what it is, and I just don't see it out there. But when we see it and there's like a spark, you kind of like ignite the possibility for other people, and then they can go in their own journey and find out what their versions of that is for them. You know what I mean? It's not about like replicating what I'm doing, is about you going in within yourself and figuring out who are you
Mm.
as a leader and then show up from that.
Great words. I would say profound words, Tatiana. I heard it said once that we all can be a part of an environment in which we conform to it. But in order to bring our own unique value proposition to it, we have to move from conforming to the environment and creating an environment in which we're allowed to be our true self, our authentic self, and that absolutely calls for vulnerability. But I've heard from many colleagues around the world, and I believe we all share so much more in common than we realize, right? In
Right.
my global travels on behalf of the university and working with students from around the world, they're sharing with me that we want so many of the same things. And we all can
Yes.
bring a voice to the discussion. We all are of value. I've heard it said the true self, the authentic self. And that just seems to be a more sustainable proposition, right? There's going to be
Yes.
growth. other good fruit will come from it. We have more capacity to bring people along with us, right? When we're not in that state of constantly conforming, because you waste so much time
Yes.
understanding to what degree I need to conform to, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so I love
Yeah.
that when you and I spoke a few weeks ago in understanding this movement to thriving. Well, we thrive when we are ourselves, and
Yes.
and that when we take that risk, as you've done, Tatiana, it can be rewarded. You have aligned yourself with some of the world's better known companies, and you had good reason for each time doing so. And now you're at a point where you're saying, in bringing my true self and bringing people along, I will add to the discussion. I will add to the benefits and the fruit that's being created, and I think that's a wonderful paradigm shift from my generation, who probably conformed even more so, right? But are coming to the point, maybe some of us through parenthood, some of us through other responsibilities in our lives, and in the midst of a global pandemic, to be able to say, at my most vulnerable point, this is where I want to spend my time and my energy. This is what's important to me and what I can bring to the table. And
Mhm.
maybe part of that is what we spoke on as well, mindset. Well, what do you think about that, Tatiana? What have you taken from your own journey and taken from your own transformational work, from more of a fixed to a growth mindset and building a more healthy one?
Yeah, I love that. And it's such a good point that, like, I feel like with the pandemic, it was like a great pause,
Mm,
right? And just an incredible opportunity to go when we couldn't go out, we had to go inwards. At least
mm,
that's how I feel like my journey was.
I like
And
that very much.
yeah, and from that, challenge a few things that maybe we were taking for granted, or stop the autopilot, and perhaps clarify what really is important to us, our values. And as we talk about thriving, redefining what that means to us,
Mm,
right? Because so many of us, myself included, was working so hard to achieve a definition of what thriving and success was, but it was based on other people's definition of
mm,
success. But what is my definition of success? What does thriving mean to me? Right? And like how then I create that, because we are creators. And from a mindset standpoint, the biggest thing is realizing that our minds can be our best allies or our worst enemies.
well said.
And I, the stories that are going on in our heads, like all the time, I call them novellas because I'm Brazilian, but they're very dramatic, right? There's like a lot of gunk that's kind of happening in there. And then, with the pandemic and all the unknown and all the fear and all of that. So like all of like the novellas just got like exacerbated, and we don't like to not feel like we're not in control, and then changes in every corner. So really for me, as again, I couldn't go outwards, so I turned inwards. It was this sort of realization and redefinition of what work meant to me, which to me, I call it now inner work.
Mm,
But it's this idea of turning inwards and unlearning things that have been holding me back, shifting the things that are not in alignment and not empowering with where I want to go, and managing, becoming the author of the novella rather than the victim,
mm,
right?
yes.
And really, I think that's how we take our power back, and then can build and define what thriving even means to us. Most of us haven't even stopped to clarify what that means to us. Who do we want to be coming out of this? What what do I want from work?
Mm,
And as I went through that journey, and I have been going through the journey, It's when it became clear to me that like, okay, I'm ready for a next chapter, right? And I'm also ready to start showing up like this everywhere I go. And as you were saying, we have so much in common, but we don't know because we don't talk about it,
Mhm.
because we keep the armors on. But as I've taken the armor off and I've been really, really open about the ups and downs and the struggles and the lessons, so many people that I didn't think I had anything in common, they're like, oh my God, like different novella perhaps, but a novella. And
Mhm.
like we can learn from one another. But that can only happen if we again take the armor off and start showing up as ourselves. But sometimes when, especially when difficulties are happening and all the craziness that is all around us in the world, it's so easy to point our finger outwards to things that need to change and should change in companies and cultures and societies and the world. And sometimes we feel small, like, who am I to drive this change, right? Like, I'm just me. And for me, I realized that actually the change can only happen within me. It
Hmm.
has to start within me and within you and within all of us. Like, we can't wait for somebody else because they're not going to. They're maybe in their different journeys. But when we go through the change ourselves and change from within, then we kind of start a ripple, you
Hmm.
know, a ripple effect. And I just fundamentally believe that's kind of how we'll usher in this like new way of like being and working and leading that's more in alignment with like who we want to be rather than the playbook that we had from the past.
Fantastic. And I am so excited for our next cyber focused discussion to speak on that and the eradication of one dimensional leadership and so many other good topics that you and I could talk about, Tatiana, because in and through your vulnerability and through these discussions and you sharing your thoughts, I know that you're inspiring many and you're certainly inspiring me, and I appreciate that so very much. And I think your generation and maybe even our children will apply some of these understandings for themselves to be writing the most exciting, wonderful novellas for themselves
Yes.
that really contribute to making the world a better place, both through business, through you name the discipline. But I feel like if technology's done anything for us, it has allowed us to communicate more authentically with one another if we choose to
Mhm.
use the tools wisely, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, Tatiana, thank you so much for your time today. It was
Thank
a
you,
pleasure
Tim.
to catch up. Thrilled to have yet another successful, compassionate leader within the Kelley family say yes to sitting down with me. So,
Thank you for having me. It's an honor, and I'm here to help in any way I can. So thank you.
oh, thank you, Tatiana. Tatiana, you helped us all so much today, and I look forward to our next discussion.
Me too. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye bye.